It's a little tradition of mine that every year I sculpt the same Batman from The Dark Knight Returns. And honestly, I think I've been playing it safe. So today we're going big. It's been a minute. It's nice to see you again. I've been away for about a year. It's good to be back. Got a new studio, little corner, all to myself. So I got to christen it with a brand new project. Being me, it's been about a year, which means it's about that time for another Batman. So we're doing Batman from The Dark Knight Returns. And instead of just doing usually what I do every year, which is the same pose, the same moment from the comic book, we're going to step it up a little bit. Different pose, different moment from the same comic book. It's still going to be a lot of fun. It's actually going to be a lot harder. I tried to step my game up a little bit with a horse. Batman on a horse, if you haven't guessed by now. It's a little test of my skill, seeing as how I might be a little bit out of practice. A little rusty. Nothing a big project can't fix. I've actually noticed my hands are way weaker than they used to be. They start to hurt after a good half hour of sculpting. Never used to happen. This is the longest I've gone without sculpting consistently in 8 years. So yeah, good project to start it back up again. So the first step is going to have to be the horse. That's because it's kind of the base of the whole thing. I like to keep everything super stable, so we're going to have to do the Aves epoxy all over again. Just for a little bit of context, if you haven't seen my videos before, Aves epoxy clay is a self-hardening 2-part clay that hardens over 24 hours, and it's very strong when it's done. And then go over that with some tin foil, tape that up, keep it all nice and together, and then add the clay on top and try to get the detail going. This thing is actually quite expensive compared to my usual projects. I've already used 2 blocks of clay, so that's $44 down the drain already. Which is alright, it's part of the game here. Once the horse's body is done, I can finally start adding the saddle itself and the details for the reins, and then I can have Batman on top of that already. So we already know how this works. Batman from this comic book is a big, old, beefy, burly fella. He's a bit on the heavier side, which is partly why I made the horse so much bigger. In the comics, it's just a regular horse with skinny legs. You know, I don't see Batman on a horse like that. Specifically this Batman, I think the horse would be a bit thicker, you know, with bigger legs, like a Belgian draft horse, something with a bit more meat to it, something that can withstand such a beefcake being on its back at high speeds. Now for the main part of the sculpting project. The whole reason I did the horse in the first place is so that I could get Batman on top of it. Like I do with every one of these videos. I try and focus on the big, stupid, ridiculous anatomy of this dude. He's supposed to be like in his 50s, but jacked to the gills. A bit beefier than his younger self, like the waistline's gone a little bit. He's still like shredded to bits. The comic book anatomy is always my favorite part of these projects. The face is the part I try to nail as soon as possible, because it does dictate the rest of the scale. One suggestion I did get on my last video is that I try to get a little more emotion out of Batman on this project. All the times before this, he's had a kind of the same neutral or grumpy expression, and that's kind of what I started with here. Towards the end of sculpting his face, I realized it didn't fit, and it was about time I stepped my game up with the facial expression too. So I opened up his mouth and made him bare his teeth, and it did kind of give it much more drama and emotion. I was also much happier with the proportions on this project. Last year especially, I felt that I had gone a little overboard with the muscular aspect and made him look a bit too Hulk-like. This year, I think I definitely improved the proportions. He's still ridiculously muscular, but it's a little more realistic, and I think that has to do with the size of his head this year. His head is actually realistically big enough for the kind of human that would have arms like tree trunks and thighs like tree trunks. I stepped up the kind of size of his gloves this year as well. I wanted them to be a bit chunkier, as well as the belt. I think making the midsection as thick as the rest of him does remove that ridiculous aspect and make it a bit more realistic. Same with the boots. I wanted something that felt like heavy, something that would warrant such a giant horse carrying him around, right? And the final step really was to have his tool belt and the coveted bat bits on his gloves. This year was just the same as last year. Cut them up, bake them separately, and then super glue them onto him when it's all over. And with that, Batman is essentially done, and it's onto the painting. Alright, heed my words here. The painting process sucked. I'm not the best of painters. I rely almost entirely on my sculpting ability to get detail, and then I just kind of paint like a 2-year-old, like slapping colors on, allowing the sculpture to do the detail work for me. For some reason, I decided to go with a white base coat. I'm assuming it's because I thought that I could easily just paint his suit with one wash and call it done. That was not intelligent considering most of this sculpture is supposed to be black. I fixed this later on. I decided to go with a cheap acrylic paint over the white base coat, and then I started adding Army Painter speed paints all over it, trying to get some detail to come out and just tint the white base coat as if that'll be enough, give it a good layered effect. It wasn't, obviously. I also put some blue on his gloves, but the problem is the cheap black acrylic kept cracking, so no matter how many times I put a coat over it, it just kept cracking. So I went over the whole thing again, but this time learning from my mistake with a black spray paint. Then I started really taking my time and making good decisions because this project's pretty big and important to me, so I decided I'm gonna be a bit less of a 2-year-old with the painting. So I put base coats of gray and skin tone, and then on his skin tone I added the speed paint on top of that. So you see the base coat of yellow, then the base coat of brown for the leather on the saddle and the face harness. The detail on the face harness was awesome to paint over. You could see it coming through easily. The advantage of putting nice base coats on is you can just put quick little washes or speed paints on top of it. With the yellow belt, putting a brown leather speed paint on top of that makes it look kind of leathery, but also kind of yellow like the comic book. Another painting screw up is the blue of the boots and gloves and cowl. I decided to put a kind of royal blue on, but the particular paint I used gave it kind of a weird purplish sheen, and it didn't suit the vibe I was going for this particular project. So I decided to go over again, but this time with a blue Army Painter speed paint, which tinted the whole thing almost black. But this was kind of fortuitous because it's a slightly different black than the black of the horse, which is awesome. I didn't want those two to be too similar. I did the final little details on the horse. Adding a gloss to his eye, and only his eye, made it super realistic, and I loved it. Then little silver touch-ups on the belt. I eventually turned those silver touch-ups into gold. The cape is where, I'm not sure about it, but I just took some felt. I cut it into shape, and instead of dyeing it, instead of doing it the right way, I just spray painted it black. And then I glued it on with super glue, not in a nice, cool way. I just slapped it on and hoped for the best. And I paid for that by accidentally causing a chemical reaction that later started smoking in front of me. I don't know. I honestly have no idea how that happened. It just started smoking. I'm really glad I caught it on camera. The final little detail for me was just adding pigments on the dirt effect, which made it quite realistic. If you just paint it with acrylic, it has that slight glossy look. It's not at all what Earth looks like, but having pigments really helps. And now we're done.